Mark Mix joins me on the WSMN Newsline. He's president of the National Right to Work Committee. It's a 2.8 million member strong public policy organization. He also serves as the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Mark, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Well, Keith, it's good to be on with you, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about some of these issues. You put a nice introduction into this whole thing, and the idea that rank-and-file workers have to pay dues and fees to a guy like Richard Trumka, whose only explanation about literally thousands of pipe fitters and operating engineers being thrown off their job in day one of Joe Biden's administration was, at least he's a man of his word. He said this in May of 2020 when he's running for office, but even when he said that, these big unions here in Washington, D.C. decided to endorse him, use rank-and-file money to get him elected, and then turn around and watch as their own members are thrown off the job. It really is an amazing story.
Well, did you see the video of the interview that Trumka gave to the HBO reporter? I mean,
I did.
I mean, I was squirming in my chair as I'm watching that because the visual discomfort on Trumka's face. He's fiddling with his shoes. He's fiddling with his shoelaces. He's fiddling with his shoe cuff. He's looking. I mean, he is trying desperately to, off the cuff, on the fly, come up with something that he can respond to this reporter's questions with in a way that's not going to be damning to him and not ensure his demise via cancellation via the Biden administration and the progressive Democrats.
Yeah, and I guess the best thing he came up with was a quote that said, well, I wish you just would have paired it with something else, with the government creating jobs that would have been unionized as opposed to putting union workers on the unemployment line. I mean, he did say at the end of that interview, though, he said at least he's a man of his word, which makes the union endorsements, particularly the pipe fitters and the building trades and the operating engineers endorsements of a guy that said he was going to put all their people out of work, really amazing, and it's really the reason why right to work is important. And we're having that debate in New Hampshire right now. We had a committee hearing last week on a right to work bill that's already passed in the Senate to make New Hampshire the 28th right to work law in the country. And to your point, Keith, you know, the right to work law is about giving the worker the choice whether or not they want to financially support an organization. It has nothing to do with anybody else except for a relationship between a rank-and-file worker and the union that wants to represent them. And in the states that don't have right to work, like New Hampshire, you can be compelled to pay dues or fees to get or keep a job. It doesn't make any sense. And one would think that the union official would finally realize that if they actually go out and try to recruit workers and actually provide services to workers and do something that the workers value, that they would join voluntarily. But no, they have to use the power of compulsion and force to get people in, and that's not a winning recipe by any stretch.
No, when you have to force people to do it, you got to sit back and go, okay, what's the benefit here? It's like Social Security. Okay, I mean, you have money that is taken out of your paycheck that is put into the Social Security slush fund. It's such a brilliant investment scheme that people have to be forced to do it. Why not you let me take that 7.5%? And I'll tell you what, if I took 7.5% and just parked it in Bitcoin, I don't need a check. I don't need a check. If I had put 7.5% of my salary back in 2010 into Bitcoin, I wouldn't be working today. I would be sitting on the beach earning 5,000%.
Yeah. Well, and don't forget about the 7.5% that comes from the employer side of the equation as well. I mean, it's a pretty amazing story when you think about it. But look, getting back to the unions, you talked about at the beginning to lead in here that, unions had a place, and they still do have a place, but there's no place for force. And that's the only argument they've got. They've got nothing else to say other than, my God, everything we do benefits everybody in the world, and therefore everyone ought to pay for it. And that's just not true. It's not true. We're down to about 6% unionization in the private sector. Their final frontier is government. We've seen how that's worked out for states like California, Illinois, Connecticut, New York. I mean, those stories are being written as we speak about financial, just basically destruction of state government budgets and pensions and things that you've mentioned. I mean, it's the compulsion and this forced association and forced dues that are really what's taken unions from being something that was necessary, something that was important, something that was viable, into being wards of the political process. And that's why they have to play politics with literally billions of dollars every 2 years to elect people that will maintain this government-granted power.
I just ran the calculations, by the way. If I had put $2,500 into Bitcoin on December 1st, 2012, it'd be worth $11,266,000 today.
Well, one would hope the Social Security Administration might have done that, but they didn't, I don't think. I'm not sure.
No. No. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a bankrupt system. It's a Ponzi scheme at this point. I mean, they're literally just taking money in to pay it off. And to be honest with you, when you look at the unfunded liabilities of a lot of states and also with a lot of these unions, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I had somebody on from California the other day who was talking about the debt that California's debt is unsustainable. It's all unfunded liabilities. It's pensions. It's retirement packages. It's all of these different perks that they give people because it's free. We'll just kick the can down the road and we'll pay it down the road. But there's no fiscal responsibility. There's no fiscal accountability anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And something that just happened in the so-called COVID relief bill, the $1.9 trillion that passed in the House and the Senate, and that bill had $86 billion to buy out the liability of multi-employer pension funds, i.e. union pension funds, that were on a critical basis and would basically not survive another couple of years. But now, get this, Keith, $86 billion in taxpayer money goes out to fund those things with no obligation to repay the money, and they'll cover any multi-employer pension that's basically claimed until 2051. That was in the bill. I mean, so they're getting bailed out on both sides. I mean, the states are getting bailed out. California gets healthy on our taxpayer dollars, and these multi-employer union pension funds are getting bailed out by their colleagues here in Washington, D.C. It's to your point. I mean, it's really amazing. Apparently, we can grow money on trees. I don't know.
I'd like a money tree in my backyard if I could request one. If Santa could bring me a money tree, that would be great. That'd be fantastic. So how are things looking? I mean, we're in New Hampshire. We have that. We talk about all the time, the New Hampshire advantage. But how are things looking right now in terms of right to work passing here in the Granite State?
Well, it's already through the Senate. The bill got introduced there, and it passed. It had a committee hearing, and it passed the Senate on the floor. Now it's over in the House. As I mentioned last week, there was a hearing on the bill, Senate Bill 61, and it looks like the committee is not going to act on the bill for a week or two. And basically, the good news about New Hampshire is that when a bill is introduced and it gets a committee hearing, it gets a vote. So the legislators in New Hampshire are going to vote one way or another on right to work again. And obviously, this is something, Keith, if we've passed the bill and had it vetoed by the governor. We've had the House and the governor, not the Senate. We've had the Senate and the governor, not the House. We've had the House and the Senate without the governor over the years. And now it looks like hopefully we can get the bill through the House and get it onto Governor Sununu's desk. And we think he supports the bill. Obviously, he'll make his decision about that if we can get it to that desk. And it's really an amazing story. And in a state that has a slogan of live free or die, the idea that they allow the federal government to impose forced unionism on private sector workers. And, I mean, notwithstanding the fact that every worker in the country has the ability to choose whether or not they want to join a union. If they want to participate, they can. If they want to give their entire paycheck to the union, they can. But in New Hampshire and 22 other states, you lose your job if you don't pay a private organization for the privilege or the right to work. And New Hampshire, of all places, should not be a state with its logo, live free or die, on its license plate that allows compulsory forced union dues to get or keep a job.
So how many employees right now are under the thumb of a union in the state? Any idea?
Well, in the private sector, I think your union density is something like it's relatively low. I mean, I think it's probably maybe 9 to 10%. I think I have the exact number here somewhere, but it's not that big of a deal. I mean, that's the point. You know, across the country, only 6% of the private sector workforce is unionized. I mentioned that means that 94% of all private sector workers are finding a way to get a paycheck. They're finding a way to get health insurance. They're finding a way to get a retirement plan. And it's interesting now, Keith, that the AFL-CIO has actually started a defined contribution plan now, because they realize that defined benefit plans are probably dinosaurs that don't operate anymore. And they were always opposed to this. You know, these pension plans where you give the employee the money and let the employee do something with it. Imagine that, as opposed to, you know, forcing them to vest and then if they go to work someplace else that you don't like, you withhold their pensions. I mean, these Teamster pension funds, basically, if you're a truck driver and you spend 20 years in the Teamsters union, you qualify for your pension, and then you go work for a non-union trucking company, guess what? You've just forfeited all of your pension. That's the way these things work. So, you know, the idea that these workers are out there and employers, I mean, look, if an employer takes care of their employees and respects them, there is no place for a union in that environment. Most of the time, when an employer is abusing their employees, then, look, we have a system that allows workers to join together to amplify their voice. But right now in New Hampshire, I mean, obviously the government unions are the ones that really kind of drive the bus up there from a policy standpoint. And the good news about that is that we won a United States Supreme Court case back in June of 2018 that freed every government employee across the country from being forced to pay dues or fees to work for their government. So we have a national right to work law when it comes to teachers and firefighters and police officers and government bureaucrats, but in the private sector, we still don't have that protection. So, these unions in New Hampshire that complain about, the teachers union, for example, their workers can choose whether or not they want to support them. And apparently they're doing okay because they're out there selling product. But the bottom line for private sector workers, we've still got work to do there. And I hope at this point, when we talk in another month or two, that New Hampshire will join the ranks of the right to work states and be number 28.
Mark Mix joins me on the WSMN Newsline. He's the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. You can check out their website at nrtw.org. That's nrtw.org. Mark, we've got just about 3 minutes left here. I wanted to get into what your thoughts were on my opening monologue in terms of the efficacy of the unions today and the value that the worker puts in the unions versus the relationship with the Democrats. Has the relationship between the unions and the Democrat Party, is it fractured? Is it broken?
Well, it is. You have to divide that, to bifurcate the union movement, and you have to make a definition between union officials. And you did this very well, Keith. You distinguish between rank and file workers out there doing the job and those folks that were actually getting a paycheck from the union themselves. Obviously, the heads of the biggest unions in this country are on board with one party. I don't have to tell you what party that is, but I think you can draw your own conclusions. When you find a union, like a pipe fitters union or an operating engineers union, that endorses Joe Biden when he actually says he's going to stop the construction of the XL pipeline, which is going to put only union people out of work, when he actually says he's going to restrict permits on oil and gas drilling and exploration on federal lands, who's he putting out of work? Again, rank and file union members. They're beginning to understand this. And Keith, New Hampshire's not a right-to-work state, but Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana all are. Why is that? Because workers there understood that union officials were not giving them, quote-unquote, the services they expected, and they made a decision. We're going to pass a right-to-work law. Those states have done that. I mean, you have to go no farther than look at the United Auto Workers Union to further expand on your opening monologue there about the corruption that comes with forced unionism. Right now, 11 UAW top officials, 2 former presidents, are either in jail or on their way to jail for stealing rank and file money for parties out in Las Vegas and $400 bottles of champagne and $60,000 worth of cigars and villas in Palm Springs. I mean, this is what compulsion does and what forced unionism does. It takes away all accountability that rank and file workers have on union officials. So you're right. The rank and file workers are beginning to understand when they start stealing money, literally in the millions, according to the federal prosecutor out in Detroit, when it came to the UAW specifically. But when they think about who they're endorsing, how they're spending their money politically, that doesn't square with a lot of folks out there that, that on the back of their pickup truck says, I'm for the Second Amendment and I'm a union member, but yet we see the union endorsement going to candidates who want to take away your guns, who want to increase taxes, and certainly want to continue and expand forced unions and power across the country.
Oh, I mean, you look at what the values of, say, for instance, the SEIU are, and, there's no way that, if I happen to be in one of those occupations that was represented by the SEIU, there's no way I would want a single dime going to the SEIU with what they back and the candidates that they back. It's just, it's morally bankrupt. But we're going to continue to watch this, and I want to get you back on again soon because I want to continue this conversation. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee and president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Again, you can check out the website at nrtw.org. I want to thank you so much for your time, and keep in touch, okay?
Thanks, Keith. We'll do it.
All right. Very good. All right. You are listening to the Monday edition of the Daily Review with me, Keith Hanson. We're going to take a very, very quick break. When we come back, we're going to check in